You know, I am new to the role of Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for our global enterprise, and I have been really thinking about what are our objectives over the next year, 3 years, 5 years. And what I'm finding is DE&I for a while was that sort of topic that many people felt they had to do, they talked about, but the actions required to actually institute it within a company, within a school, within a society is really where the rubber's hitting the road right now, in my opinion. Why is diversity so important? Well, if we're going to educate our future generation of scientists, engineers, or those that going into life science, we need to understand sort of the landscape of where the population of individuals are and make sure that we give them the same opportunities, that we get to an equitable place where there's opportunity for them to experience great things that they may not come naturally in their communities. Right. So one is just access to making sure that we have a much more diverse pool of people that have exposure. That's one. And the second is, I don't think you can underestimate, there's this overused, in my opinion, right now, concept around diversity of thinking. But I've been thinking about it, maybe it's the diversity of differences. It's the differences among so many different people, their cultural backgrounds, how they were brought up, that their stories is what's going to help us to bring new insights to tomorrow's science. And it's not going to just be the lateral way of the biology book or the chemistry book. I do think the diversity of societal impact that they've had and experiences is going to influence how we drive science forward. And I don't know how you're seeing it in your schools, but I think it's important that kids also learn very differently in different communities, in different represented communities and areas. And I think it's a matter of how do we make sure that we're understanding that and getting them the information they need, whether or not that's in different languages, different experiences. We have to think differently about the how, not only the what, I think, and we bring it in. Are you seeing that at all in your?
So one of the things that in terms of diversity, a lot of people focus specifically on just nationality or just ethnicity or just, race, religion, things like that. But what I find is that even within all of those silos, there's diversity within that, right? Some in our school, which is 90% Hispanic, we have people from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, we've got people from Mexico, Dominican Republic. So there's different groups of people who have different cultural experiences who may speak the same language, but that doesn't mean that their experiences are exactly the same. It's not a monolith. There are groups of people who are all coming together. And so when I think about, the future of the industry, coming from a public school myself, my upbringing, I didn't have a lot of the experiences that a lot of my other classmates did. And when I got to college, it was very apparent that I had missed something. That not because I didn't want to seek it out, but because I didn't know it was there.
It's so true.
Right? And so when it comes to getting those students those experiences and diversifying the workforce, we really do have to focus on how do we allow for people to see themselves as a part of the industry, not just, oh, I see, another brown or another black person, but oh, this person came from the Dominican Republic. This person is from Brazil. This person speaks the same language, or they grew up in the same neighborhood as I did. And those experiences all culminating together give us that diversity that we really need to get those creative ideas and those new solutions and innovate in ways that we probably wouldn't see.
So well said, so well said. And Ken, I'm sure you're thinking about, I know you're talking about the strategy. I'm assuming that DE&I is a big lens that you're kind of looking at it. And I think the way that Andre represented it is so important, even within the subsections of gender, race, religion, there are subsections that we have to really understand and appreciate, I would say.
Absolutely. Look, I could not have said it better than Andre did. I think people tend to think very superficially when they think about diversity, rather than the more nuanced and more complex way that you laid it out, Renee, just a moment ago. But I think it fundamentally all comes down to one thing, which is math is math. And what I mean by that is, having served as a D&I professional myself for the last 7 years before this job, and when you get up and think about this stuff every day and go to bed thinking about this stuff and waking up in the middle of the night thinking about this stuff. So get ready.
I am.
Because it is the one job I've had where it takes all of your soul, just for the record. I'll share that with you. It's not about just getting up in the morning worrying about how many widgets I sell or whether or not my commercials are really getting the eyeballs I want. It brings your soul into this job. So anyway, I'm convinced that the state that has the most diverse workforce in life sciences is going to ultimately be the winner. And here's why. Back to math. If you think about the demographic tide that's coming over the next 30 to 40, 50 years here in the United States, we're going to go from being a majority Caucasian population to a majority brown population. If you look at the forecast for California, Florida, Texas, just alone, those 3 states alone, how drastically they're going to change. And so, again, just being practical. If you think about where do you want your workforce to be, right? It's a little bit like, I'll go back to my Navy thing, right? It's about driving a ship. One of the things my captain pointed out to me was kind of obvious is, hey, just so you remember, we don't have brakes. And so the point being is when you're navigating, particularly in restrictive waters, you can't think about here, you have to think about here. You have to look way down the pike and know where you want to go and how you're going to get there so that you're thinking ahead. The same applies to us when we think about our workforce. We got to think that 30, 40, 50-year horizon, right? That puts us in a position where we're bringing everybody to the table. Because sooner or later, that's what you're going to have.
Absolutely.
That's where you're going to end up. So why not get out ahead of that? Why not bring everybody in now while we have the opportunity to really change the face of our workforce? And so that, to me, again, is the exciting aspect of coming out of COVID, right? Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more, and I think when you look at what MassBioEd is doing to make sure we're getting into communities that might not be the ones that naturally get the resources to be able to fund science in a way that we think we need to going forward, when you think about it, it's a cause and effect too. Sort of like the idea would be to be thinking about it as we are not just going to be able to fill talent acquisitions goals as a company by doing things the way we were doing things. And it's not just having a DE&I officer that's going to make those things happen. We have to think about it how it's embedded in the business, and I'm a firm believer that there are 3 things to keep in mind. DE&I drives revenue. That is an important thing, and that we are businesses that are trying to drive that forward. Second, it drives our talent goals. It helps us to make sure that we're thinking of the pipeline today, filling that tomorrow, but we're retaining people who want to be in the companies that we sort of employ people. And the third thing, which is probably the most important thing, is it serves our purpose and mission, which is bringing medicines to people, bringing therapies, bringing new options, diagnostics, whatever it might be. And most importantly, it's doing well in the community, that we're doing right by people who can be the future great scientists. So when I think about those goals, which I think many companies have similar ones, we have to do this because it's going to be what makes the difference. And I just don't think having the same kind of people with the same kind of experiences sitting around the table is going to get us to where we got to be.
Yeah, I think that when you think about, textbooks and, the quintessential picture of a scientist, a lot of students don't see themselves, right? When I was a kid, I didn't really see a lot of people. I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson, I saw Ben Carson, I saw Mae Jemison. Like I saw people who looked like me, but they were never in the places that I wanted to be, right? So I never thought that for me, that was a future. I figured, oh, well, maybe I don't know how to do this, or, oh, I don't have the access. So like, as an adult, looking back, there were so many opportunities that I could have taken advantage of as a student. I didn't know that I could have taken advantage of them because I didn't have the foresight to look that way. I want to, for my students, give them that opportunity and show them like, oh, here are people who look like you. Here are people who come from your country. Here are people, in our neighborhood who've done these things and work in these companies. And it's not just something that happens off in a faraway land. Like, this is happening in your backyard. And when we think about, bringing technologies, like you were saying, to the people, a lot of people like to see someone who looks like them, to give them that added source of like community and trust. And I think that, having the same people in the same places and always talking about the same things in the same ways doesn't reach the group. And as we diversify in the future, we have to make sure that people feel as though they can see themselves not only for getting treatments and going to the doctor and feeling comfortable, but also being those doctors and being the people who's coming up with the treatments.
I think it's a little bit when you're talking, Andre, and as we're having the conversation, Ken, it's about moving the I can't or I don't like, which you often hear from students and kids, to the I want to, I actually understand. And I think fostering that and nurturing that is going to be really important for all populations and all students who might not think naturally that that's coming to their minds. And I was thinking teachers play such a critical role. The administrations of school districts play a critical role because they're the ones that are often encouraging and putting together the curriculums. And I think that's another portion of the seat at the table we need to have in our discussions to make sure that the curriculums don't get just so as the traditional way, and that is also moving with the time. And I think that's something that as you push through the strategy and we think about diversity and inclusion and we think about those components, it's also about influencing the how we get it done from a curriculum perspective. And I think that's what MassBio has done beautifully. We just have to kind of make it a little bit more endemic within the programming.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's about identifying programming that works and then scaling it up.
Absolutely.
That's the way I think about it. And that's one of the things that we're going to do coming out of the strategy session at the center that I've been working with my partners at KPMG on, is that, and I've said this to the staff, is that every decision we make is going to be through the lens of DE&I. I think that that's the critical piece, is that we've got to think that way. And so when I think about our high school apprenticeship program, which I was talking to Andre about earlier today, I mean, we've invested, I want to say about $21.5 million or so into that program, supporting some, 300, 400 schools across the state, including every vocational school. Now, how do we take that to the next level, right? How do we take that to the next level? That's our challenge. And coming out of the strategy work, that's what I'm excited about, because we're going to take that challenge on head on. And I think the results, will put us in a position where we solidify our leadership position in the United States and in the world in terms of our ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that one thing that you just said really makes it, one thing kind of just made my brain start thinking about how people sometimes can perceive, a push for diversity, a push for equity. They can see it as taking resources away from them, when in actuality, I think it actually provides more resources for everyone, because if we identify programming and apprenticeship programs and positions that are available to people, it allows for everyone to see that this is available, not just the people who are underrepresented. We can put a focus on helping those people and getting them to the places where they need to be so that the exposure and the tools are there for them to get there. But by identifying what works and what's good, it opens the door for everyone to come in and say, hey, we can all work on this together. And I really think that diversity, equity, and inclusion should really be something that everyone is focusing on, because it influences everything that we do. Having more people in more places helps everyone.
The point you just made, though, I think is this emphasis. Maybe we've been a little over-indexed, especially on the diversity components. I think we have to be equally indexed on the inclusiveness and the welcomingness and this behavioral change that is required so that people don't think, well, now Renee is the new DE&I person, that's Renee's job, or when you were into the... Yeah. I think we have to think about it in a way that says every interaction, every experience has an impact. And whether or not that's a scientific experiment that is done through the great work at MassBioEd, or through an interaction in the hallway to say, you can do that, especially within our school system. That's what's going to help us fill a diverse talent pipeline, right? It's fostering it from very early on that we are all included in this, but everyone should feel an inclusive element of how they're going to help drive it forward, because our goals are big.
I could not have said it better. You, Andre, just touched on it so eloquently, which is, it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
It's not I win, you lose.
Exactly.
Right? We've got to get people to really understand that diversity, equity, inclusion benefits everyone. Truly lifts all boats, right? It truly does. And so once we adopt that mindset, then we come back to, you come up with elegant solutions because you've got creative minds coming together which will innovate. When I think about the work we did at the Port Authority when we launched the MassPort model, which is now taught at Harvard Business School and at Harvard Kennedy School as a innovative model around business diversity equity. That came from collaboration. That didn't come from Ken Turner. That came from a team of folks coming together that, I was fortunate enough to lead. But the point being is that creativity came out of partnership. That creativity came out of collaboration between the commercial real estate sector, between government, between the trades. It was a collaboration, and the same can happen in our ecosystem.
Absolutely. I think it's time that we really took a hard look at how diversity, equity, and inclusion fits into our planning, our programming, and when we're thinking about talent acquisition, it really does start in the schools. So the more we can do from the private as well as the public sector to support and nurture that, the better off we're going to be. And we're fortunate to have institutions like Mass Life Science Center, but institutions like MassBioEd, and a government that really supports the work that we're doing to make sure that it's not lost on us. We got to think about it now to be ready for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Exactly.